Across the silent mountains of southern Ethiopia, where forests hide ancient paths and valleys preserve forgotten memories, there remains a story that history has never fully told. A story of land, resistance, and a struggle that reshaped an entire region. At the center of this forgotten chapter stands a name, Waaqoo Guutuu. Some describe him as a commander, others as a symbol of rural resistance, but in the highlands of Bale, his name continues to echo through generations like a shadow that refuses to fade. This is not just a story of conflict. It is a story of survival, identity, and a movement born from the mountains of Ethiopia. This is the story of the Bale Revolt. And before we begin, if you are new here, make sure you stay tuned until the end. Right finger, don't forget to subscribe to Africa, press thumbs up, like this video, speech balloon, drop your thoughts in the comments, repeat button, and share this story with others who need to hear it. Because what you are about to hear is not just history, it is a story that still lives in memory today. Let's proceed to the main story. Waaqoo Guutuu, the untold story of Ethiopia's Bale Revolt and the mountain resistance. Across the southern highlands of Ethiopia, where vast mountain ranges cut through deep valleys and forested landscapes, oral traditions continue to preserve the memory of events that shaped the political and social history of the region. In these highlands of Bale, history is not confined to written archives alone, but is also carried through generations in spoken memory, cultural narration, and lived experience. Among the names that repeatedly emerge in these accounts is General Waaqoo Guutuu, a figure closely associated with one of the most significant rural uprisings in modern Ethiopian history, commonly known as the Bale Revolt of the 1960s. Historical records, academic research, and oral testimonies place his life and actions within a broader context of political transformation, land administration changes, and rural resistance during the imperial era in Ethiopia. To understand how such a figure emerged, historians often return to the structural realities of the Bale region during the mid-20th century, when land ownership systems and governance structures were undergoing significant centralization under the imperial administration. During this period, large portions of fertile land were controlled by landlords, state officials, or institutions aligned with the monarchy. Rural communities, particularly in southern Ethiopia, experienced increasing pressure through taxation systems, land redistribution policies, and administrative reforms. These policies, according to historical studies on Ethiopian agrarian systems, often disrupted traditional land use patterns and local governance structures that had existed for generations. As administrative control expanded deeper into rural areas, tensions gradually intensified. By the early 1960s, these pressures had begun to manifest in localized dissatisfaction across various communities. In regions such as Bale, where geography made centralized governance more difficult to enforce, these tensions became more pronounced. Rural populations, largely dependent on land and pastoral livelihoods, began to experience increasing economic and administrative strain. It is within this environment that early forms of resistance began to appear. Historical accounts describe these initial movements not as organized armies, but as scattered and informal groups composed of farmers, herders, and local community members responding to immediate grievances. Over time, these early formations began to develop coordination and structure. Waaqoo Guutuu is frequently identified in historical literature and oral traditions as one of the individuals who emerged during this transitional phase. His role is described as evolving gradually, influenced by local conditions and broader political dynamics affecting rural Ethiopia. Rather than appearing as a single centralized authority, his leadership is portrayed as developing through participation in emerging resistance activities and local organization. As these scattered groups began to consolidate, the movement in Bale gradually evolved into a more structured form of resistance. Academic studies often describe the Bale uprising as a decentralized guerrilla movement shaped heavily by geography and local knowledge. The mountainous terrain, dense forests, and limited infrastructure of the region created conditions where mobility, familiarity with land, and local support networks became essential. By the mid-1960s, the movement had developed into a sustained rural insurgency. Historical sources describe multiple local commanders operating across different parts of Bale, coordinating activities in a loosely structured but increasingly connected network. Waaqoo Guutuu is consistently mentioned among these figures, often described as one of the prominent individuals associated with the coordination of resistance activities. The structure of the movement included small mobile groups that relied on terrain knowledge and community support. These groups were able to move through forested and mountainous areas in ways that made direct confrontation difficult for conventional forces. In some periods, parts of rural Bale experienced shifts in control as resistance activity expanded. As the movement expanded, the imperial government began responding with increased military presence in the region. Historical accounts describe a sustained period of conflict in which government forces and resistance groups operated across shifting territories. The conflict was largely rural and irregular, shaped more by geography and local conditions than by conventional warfare structures. Military operations aimed to restore administrative control and dismantle resistance networks operating in the region. These operations involved coordinated deployments across multiple areas, reflecting the growing scale of the conflict. At the same time, resistance groups adapted their strategies to changing conditions on the ground. During this phase, Waaqoo Guutuu is reported in various historical accounts to have played a coordinating role within the broader resistance structure. Some interpretations describe him as a field-level commander, while others emphasize his symbolic importance within the movement as a recognized figure associated with organized resistance in Bale. As the conflict continued into the late 1960s, several factors contributed to its gradual decline. Historical sources point to increased military pressure from government forces, internal fragmentation within resistance groups, and broader political changes within Ethiopia as key contributing elements. Over time, these combined pressures reduced the operational capacity of the movement. By the early 1970s, reports indicate that Waaqoo Guutuu eventually surrendered. This moment is often interpreted as marking the end of the organized phase of the Bale uprising during its most active period. However, the underlying issues that contributed to the conflict, including land distribution and governance tensions, continued to influence broader political developments in Ethiopia. Following the end of active resistance, historical records suggest that Waaqoo Guutuu spent part of his later life outside Ethiopia, including periods in neighboring countries such as Kenya. His activities during this later stage are less documented in formal academic sources, although oral traditions continue to reference his presence and influence. He is widely reported to have passed away in 2006 in Nairobi, Kenya. His burial in the Bale region is often described in historical narratives as symbolically significant, representing a return to his place of origin. The legacy of Waaqoo Guutuu remains subject to differing interpretations. Within academic literature, he is often discussed within broader themes of rural resistance movements, land and governance conflicts, and regional political identity formation in Ethiopia. Some perspectives emphasize his role as a military figure within a localized insurgency, while others highlight his symbolic importance in collective historical memory. Oral histories within Oromo communities continue to preserve his name as part of the broader remembrance of resistance in the Bale region. These narratives vary in detail but consistently place him within a historical period marked by structural change and rural mobilization. The Bale Revolt itself is now widely studied as part of Ethiopia's broader history of rural uprisings during the imperial period. It is often compared with other regional movements that emerged in response to land, governance, and administrative reforms. Within this wider historical framework, Waaqoo Guutuu is positioned as one of several figures associated with early organized resistance movements that shaped political consciousness in southern Ethiopia. The story of Waaqoo Guutuu, as reconstructed through historical records and oral traditions, remains part of a larger narrative of rural resistance and political transformation in Ethiopia. While interpretations of his role differ across sources, his name continues to appear in discussions of the Bale Revolt and its impact on regional history. As the story of Waaqoo Guutuu fades into the pages of history, questions continue to linger across the highlands of Bale. In the memory of the mountains where the movement once moved in silence, his name remains part of a larger historical reflection that has never fully disappeared. Some historical interpretations describe him as a commander within a rural resistance movement, while others place him within a broader symbolic framework of struggle and identity. Across academic writings and oral traditions, his role is remembered in different ways, shaped by perspective, time, and collective memory. The Bale Revolt itself is now often viewed as part of a wider historical pattern of rural uprisings that emerged during the imperial period in Ethiopia. These movements reflected deeper tensions surrounding land, governance, and rural administration, which affected many communities across the region. Over time, the conflict in Bale came to an end, but the historical questions it raised continued to echo beyond its immediate period. The experiences of that era remain present in discussions of regional history and political transformation in Ethiopia. Waaqoo Guutuu's later life, including his time outside Ethiopia and his reported passing in 2006, is often mentioned in historical summaries, though details remain limited in formal records. Oral traditions continue to reference his presence, linking his memory to the landscapes where the events once unfolded. In the broader historical context, his name remains connected to the narrative of resistance, change, and rural struggle in the southern highlands. While interpretations differ, his story continues to appear in discussions of the Bale Revolt and its place in Ethiopia's modern history. And so, the memory of Waaqoo Guutuu remains part of a larger unfinished story, one carried not only in written records, but also in the voices and recollections of the land itself.
Hello.